Good Tuesday evening, everybody, live from the Hill Studios in Washington, D.C. This is the Hill's Decision Desk 26 Data Nerds. It's another Tuesday night in America, but we are not counting votes, ladies and gentlemen. No. We are listening closely to arguments because it is debate night in the great state of Michigan. What was going to be a three-person debate now turns to just two. Haley Stevens, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, both squaring off tonight for a chance to take on Mike Rogers come the general election in November. This debate going down in Grand Rapids, Michigan at WOOD TV8 studios there. Want to bring in Rick Albin, a political reporter at WOOD TV8. He has a bit of a preview of what we might see tonight.
We here at WOOD TV are very excited to be hosting not one, but two debates in Grand Rapids this week. The first is Tuesday night and will feature two Democrats vying for their party's nomination for the open U.S. Senate seat left vacant by the retirement of Senator Gary Peters, a Democrat who has served 2 terms. Dr. Abdul El-Sayed and Congresswoman Haley Stevens will answer questions about the economy, national security, and the state of the nation as we head into an election cycle that will determine which party will control the nation's upper chamber. The Democrat who wins the August primary will face Republican Mike Rogers, who narrowly lost another open Senate seat to Alyssa Slotkin 2 years ago. A Republican has not won a U.S. Senate seat for Michigan since 1994. Democrats want to keep that streak alive, while Republicans will be doing everything they can to reverse the pattern. The race on the Democratic side will offer a choice between an establishment-endorsed candidate in Stevens, who has been backed by former U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow and former Governor Jennifer Granholm, and El-Sayed, who counts among his supporters Senator Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The race will be about control of the Senate, yes, but it will also give some indication of the direction of the Democratic Party and where it may move going forward. From AI to data centers and auto manufacturing, there's a lot to talk about, and we'll get to all of it as we begin debate week in Michigan. Our second debate will be Thursday with Republican candidates running for their party's nomination for governor. I'm Rick Albin.
All right, now that we have been primed on what we can expect tonight, we are ready to hear a debate. Things start at 7 o'clock, so you're with us for about another half hour. I want to go ahead and bring in our friend Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, co-host of Whole Hog Politics as well at The Hill. Chris, good evening to you, my friend, also joined by Caroline Vakil here in studio. We've had a lot of movement in this primary, Chris, just this week. That's where I want to start. How do the dynamics change now that this debate is a one-on-one and not a one-on-one-on-one with Mallory McMurrow out?
Assumption is that Mallory McMurrow's vote will go more to El-Sayed than it would have to Stevens. I think that's undisputable, just given the fact that she had positioned herself sort of between the two, but certainly to the left of Stevens. Stevens is bound to have to try to make an electability argument. And what we know about primary electorates, they hate electability arguments, right? So if you say to voters, I know I'm not the one that you like best, but you have to choose me in order to win in November, that does not warm the cockles of anybody's heart. Janet Mills in Maine, the Graham Plattner debacle could be explained by many things, but one thing that does explain it is that Janet Mills made an electability argument to Maine primary voters, and people say, no, we want to feel the feels. So this is it's a tight crack for Stevens. She's got to find a way, if she's going to make an electability argument, to look like the more electable candidate.
How does she make that argument, given that she is the establishment, and it doesn't seem within at least the Democratic Party right now there is a hunger for the establishment? Because look, if you look at her policies, if you look at some of the bills that she sponsored, signed on to, supported, she's as progressive as a lot of folks out there. Does Abdul El-Sayed go at her because she is establishment, or does he try to say, look, I am more to the left and thus more in line with where the party is right now, even in a state like Michigan?
I think he won't just, but I think what you'll hear a lot from him is she's bought and paid for. She's a tool of corporate interests. She's a tool of Israel. She's a tool of AIPAC. Israel will be a huge flashpoint in this debate, I assume. Certainly in this election, it has been. If you go to Ann Arbor, if you go to Lansing, what are you going to see? You're going to see a lot of younger voters who are staunchly anti-Israel. In Michigan, it's more potent in the Democratic electorate because there's a large Arab American population in suburban Detroit. If you go to Dearborn, you go wherever, you're going to see big numbers, a couple 100,000, largest Arab American population in any American state. So these are voters who are deeply suspicious about Zionism, deeply suspicious of Israel. There has been some uglier stuff from that side, but that's a flashpoint that El-Sayed can use to his advantage to alienate those voters from Stevens. She has to hope that she can get him on the Graham-Plattner question. If you are, think about Michigan Democrats in a few categories. You have hardcore progressives, you have or hardcore anti-Israel on one side, that these are the people that are El-Sayed's natural constituency. And then you have some moderate, suburban, mainstreamy kind of establishment Democrats. And then you have a bunch of people who just basically want to win and they want to feel good about winning. Haley Stevens has to convince those voters that El-Sayed risks a Plattner situation in Michigan. There are no allegations of anything like what has been alleged against Graham Plattner, but there is the specter of you go with a firebrand candidate, you go with a disruptive candidate. What if you find yourself in the general election with a bad bargain, a bum steer? That's the message that Stevens has to make, and the way that she makes it is by trying to keep the pressure on him about Graham Plattner. I don't know what El-Sayed has said recently, but certainly this morning his responses on Plattner were insufficient.
Yeah, he did come off not as forceful as some of his other colleagues within the progressive movement, like the Bernie Sanders, who have said Plattner needs to step aside. In terms of Abdul El-Sayed, the kitchen table issues that matter so much in a state like Michigan, like all states, but certainly in Michigan, that really make a difference. Does he have to sort of lay out some sort of plan or some sort of line of attack or approach if he were elected to Congress to get affordability done, bring down home prices, gas prices, utility prices? How does he hit the kitchen table message when we do know that he does want to focus on the AIPAC side of things and anti-establishment bent?
I think the problem of our political system, as currently constituted, is that's not what wins you primaries, right? You're 100% right. In a general election, what do you want to be talking about if you are the Democratic nominee in Michigan? You want to talk about Donald Trump corruption, and you want to talk about the high price of everything. And you want to repeat, a John Ossoff kind of campaign that focuses on the problems inside the Trump administration, the, what was it, $1.6 billion, whatever the astonishing sum of money that the president made in his first term, or the first year of his second term. You want to talk about that, and you want to talk about how expensive everything is and how uncertain the economy feels. Those are good general election talking points that can deliver a bunch of wins for Democrats in a bunch of different places. But I don't know that that's what the Democratic, to your point, I don't think that's what the Democratic primary electorate in Michigan, certainly it wasn't the case in Colorado last week, right? Even being staunchly anti-Trump, even a relentless focus on core economic issues, that's not what primary voters in Denver were thinking about when they ousted DeJed after 30 years. So Stevens is sort of a young old person. She has the backing of the Democratic establishment broadly, which has kept her in the race. But of course, that's this liability in a party that's going through its own Tea Party moment.
All right, Chris, we'll have to leave it there, my friend. Thank you so much for your time and insight. Enjoy the debate. Surely going to be spicy, but also hopefully very informative. So thank you very much. All right, let's bring Caroline Vakil in. She is here with me in studio. Caroline, I'll ask you the same thing I asked Chris. How have the dynamics changed in this race? Because it was almost measuring up And I use measure from the standpoint of, if you look at these three candidates, it's sort of a small, medium, and large progressivism, right? Where you have Abdul El-Sayed on one end of the spectrum and Haley Stevens on the other. Mallory Monroe, maybe leaning towards either way. But how have the dynamics changed? How has the strategy changed now that this is just a two-person race?
I think it's definitely solidified it into a proxy battle between centrists and moderates who are backing Haley Stevens and the progressive populist sort of insurgent faction that is backing Abdul El-Sayed. So it's made that choice a lot clearer for voters. Mallory McMorrow, as you mentioned, was trying to occupy both, try to be sort of a middle-of-the-road candidate. Obviously, she wasn't able to sort of garner that interest and support and energy. So now the voters have a sort of clear choice ahead of them, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out tonight in the debate.
Put your moderator hat on. You heard Chris mention it there. How early, or let me start there. Do you ask any Graham Plattner questions at all if you're the moderator tonight?
That's a great question. I mean, it's clear that some of these candidates have already come out and spoken about it. I was just looking at Abdul El-Sayed's, social media. He had to do a little bit of cleanup just to read some of the posts. He had one from yesterday, quote, "Credible allegations of sexual assault cannot be ignored. Voters in Maine deserve a choice for U.S. Senate that doesn't force them to make a moral compromise between sexual violence or corporate servitude." And then you had some posts later today that essentially said, one of them says, quote, "Like I said last night, Graham Plattner needs to step aside." I think you're seeing at least one of these candidates struggling with this question. Obviously, Senate Republicans are going to be hammering on that. So it might be a good idea for them to, just offer a platform. What do you have to say for Graham Plattner in his campaign right now? Do you think he should drop out? This will be an easy attack line, I think, for Haley Stevens, given this might be more of a vulnerability right now for El-Sayed.
Do you think she even goes as far as saying, I'm sure she's not going to accuse Dr. Abdul El-Sayed of anything, but tying him to Plattner from the standpoint of he's an unknown quantity, and this race is too important for something to come out a little bit later. Maybe that offers a bit of a counterbalance to the criticism that he has leveled at her for AIPAC and ties to Israel and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that could be a line of attack that the Congresswoman uses, that he is, to your point, a political unknown. I mean, he ran for governor in 2018, lost to Gretchen Whitmer in that primary. And do we want to go with someone who's, quote unquote, far left, progressive, insurgent? That's sort of the grappling of this whole party right now, is the difference between, do we go with someone who's safe or do we go with someone who's going to energize the base? And the party has yet to answer that question, years and election cycles later.
Chris mentioned Haley Stevens is establishment, quote unquote, but she's young establishment. She can't get saddled with the age issue that so many establishment Democrats have been. We are in this sort of anti-incumbent environment in the Democratic Party. What does Haley Stevens have to do tonight, be it pointing to her congressional record or her own ideology, to say, look, I can be just as progressive as my opponent?
Well, you've sort of seen her. It's interesting. She has made the electability argument, which, as Chris has noted, is obviously a tougher sell for primary voters. But she's tapping into this. If you want to win in a pivotal battleground state, I'm your gal. She's also pointed to areas where she's been bipartisan. The CHIPS Act, for example, her work on that. In terms of where she's going to really rev up her base, that's sort of the key question. I will say, though, while she is not sort of seen as maybe a traditional establishment Democrat, in that she's not 50, 60, 70 years old who's been in the House forever, she has been in the House for a while now. And she, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is rumored to be backing her. She has the backing of some major establishment lobbying groups, or I should at least say at least one, the pro-Israel AIPAC's Super PAC. So in a way, it is a little hard to say that she's not totally establishment, although she is a younger face for the Senate compared to other candidates that have been put up in these contests. So to me, that's sort of her question. How does she excite her base? Because Abdul El-Sayed has kind of tapped into that in a way that I think she struggled to.
All right, Carolina, stay put. Want to go ahead and bring in Jessica Taylor and Jeffrey Skelly so we can have a little bit of fun with them tonight. Jessica, I know this is a race that you have been watching closely. What do you expect tonight? And are you sort of like me, a little bummed out that McMurrow's not going to be there? Because, you know, 3's always better than 2 sometimes.
I mean, this was a fascinating race, I think, in part because there were 3 candidates, but I think McMurrow just showed us that you can either be somewhere in the middle or you can be in the far left, that she tried to sort of, I think, be the Goldilocks candidate, and there really wasn't a lane for that. I expect fireworks, actually. The Stevens campaign has really been leaning hard into the electability argument. He also made a comment to Semaphore last week about her saying, I mean, listen, Stevens has been criticized for being awkward on the trail. She's not the most gifted politician, but said she has trouble stringing 2 sentences together. They've really leaned into that. I think that you can expect Stevens to bring that up, you know, sort of a misogynistic comment, many read it as. So I think that, you know, Abdul El-Sayed is going to, I think, push back very hard on Israel, on AIPAC, and on her backing from Schumer. So I think these are pretty, you know, there's pretty clear-cut lanes now that McMurrow isn't there. And of course, you know, just watching to see in polling after the debate, I'm watching to see sort of where those McMurrow supporters go, because I do think, and I heard Chris talking earlier, I do think some of them will gravitate toward El-Sayed because they wanted sort of more of an anti-establishment message. But I wouldn't discount some of them going to Stevens as well. They share a base in critical Oakland County, and Stevens, you know, she does well with Black voters. She's been pounding the Black churches and different things. So, you know, the electability argument may not be, you know, one that catches on, but I think that she's sort of been putting in some of the work that I wouldn't discount by among reliable Democratic primary voters.
Jeffrey, what are the numbers telling you, man? What are you seeing in this race, especially since McMurrow dropped out and we had maybe a bit of a swing in support one way or the other? What do the numbers tell you?
Well, we don't have really any public polling that we've seen yet that lays out. Unless something has come out today that I missed while I was working on a bunch of client decks for some stuff. But I did see, basically we have El-Sayed ahead of Haley Stevens in the polling that was up to the point where McMurrow dropped out. McMurrow, as Jessica was saying, was squeezed out. You know, it ended up being a 2-lane road, and she was trying to find a 3rd lane up the middle, and it just did not work. And so I think, I'm not to just repeat what Jessica was saying, but you know, I do think that the big question in this race will actually be Black voters, because if there is relatively high Black turnout in the primary, I think that's probably good news for Stevens. And I say that because the electorate in primaries does tend to be older, and so I think if you're thinking about Wayne County and Detroit proper, and if you're Haley Stevens and you need to deal with the fact that El-Sayed is probably going to crush in Washtenaw and, you know, Ann Arbor and areas like that, and Lansing, then East Lansing, you need to have an antidote for that, and that might be voters in Detroit.
Interesting. Caroline, when we look at the sort of national debate over, you know, how left the Democratic Party should go, is there any, not danger necessarily, but does the Stevens have to sort of walk that fine line and let people know, yes, I am progressive, but I also am pragmatic? And can that sell in a primary, to Chris's point, where you would certainly expect a message like that to resonate in a general election?
Well, I do think, going back to, you know, some of the points that we've made already, I think the electability argument again is going to be sort of a tough sell. But to Jessica's point, on the ground operations is going to be critical, obviously, because Black voters are obviously going to be a key Democratic voting bloc here. And at the same time, Abdul El-Sayed is going to be, you know, tapping into other voting blocs that maybe previously were not as awakened, I guess, as you might say, in 2024. Arab Muslim voters, for example, the same sort of voters who voted uncommitted for Biden. So they're having to tap into all of that, I'd say. I think for Haley Stevens, too, I think that, you know, a lot of this is also going to come down to how well the outside money game works out. I mean, there's been a lot of outside money that has been spending in support of her. And so I'm also sort of curious to see in some ways how much that will end up actually influencing the race. You know, if you're calling yourself bipartisan and, you know, saying that you're going to work across the aisle, saying that you are a quote unquote manufacturing geek, you know, I'm also going to be watching to see whether or not you put that, you know, money on air in advertising as well. It's another sort of key way to test whether or not campaigns see this as a winning message to run on.
Jessica, I asked Caroline this question. If you're the moderator of this debate, do you bring up the Graham Plattner situation? And if so, when? It's national news right now. It's out front. It's a trending topic, if you will. Yeah. But do Michigan voters really care what's going on in a Maine Senate race?
I think that given Graham Plattner sharing consultants, I would be surprised if it doesn't come up. Even if the moderator doesn't bring it up, I expect Stevens to try to tie it in there at some point. And, you know, as I heard you all saying earlier as well, I think that, you know, his initial response was lukewarm, especially compared to some of the more declarative statements that we saw out of other Senate candidates and other Democrats. You know, he has, I think, clarified that today. But you know, even again, it could, if it happens, if the moderator asks, I expect it to be at the top, because that's sort of when you get into the newsier parts of things. But I mean, this is these are all critical Senate races in the battle for control. And so if control is on the line, I think that Maine matters as well as Michigan. All of these Senate races are, you know, because again, this is a seat that Democrats are defending. And so if they lose this one, they've got to find additional seats. Maine is one of those, but if Maine's off the table, you lose Michigan, you're suddenly, you know, down one, you've lost a critical target. The math is all there. So maybe they don't get into the granular. But again, I would be really surprised if Stevens does not make this an attack line.
Jeffrey, Chris gave us a little bit of a lay of the land there in Michigan, but can you give us just a bit of a breakdown on what counties are going to matter come this Democratic primary? To Caroline's point, where could maybe we see some demographic trends emerge that we maybe didn't see back in 24 or 22?
Well, I think some of the trends that you would see or would have seen in 2024 will pop up again. Although in the context of a primary on the Democratic side in early August, I mean, a lot will matter about what Wayne County does, which is home to Detroit, and quite a few. You know, it's the biggest county, most populous place in the state, and very blue on the whole. A place like Washtenaw, where Ann Arbor is, college town, but pretty well populated in the sort of just outside of sort of Metro Detroit. It's kind of its own thing, but it's pretty close to Detroit. But it will almost certainly go for El-Sayed, and I think the margins there, of course, will matter a great deal. You know, the Lansing area will be important, of course. And then also, you know, I think it is worth remembering that in some, you know, there's Kent County, which is Grand Rapids, which has gotten bluer. That might be a place where sort of a new form of Democratic politics might be attractive, which makes me think someone like El-Sayed might be attractive to them. Although it is represented by Hillary Scholten, who is a, you know, relatively center-left Democrat. And as someone else who I think was even briefly mentioned as a potential candidate in this race, even though she did not get in the end. So, I mean, there are a lot of Democratic votes around the state. Detroit's the most important part, but you also have, you know, the Detroit suburbs. And so it could be an extremely fascinating map at the end of the day. I did also want to mention real quickly, you know, we talked about sort of the ad spending situation, and I brought up some numbers from Ad Impact here. You know, Haley Stevens has gotten an immense amount of outside support already, and much of that has been from the United Democracy Project, which is AIPAC's super PAC. And to the point about the Graham Plattner conversation, you know, one of the ads that United Democracy Project just released maybe ties into this a little bit, where they basically try to make the case that El-Sayed has been sort of disrespectful or demeaning to women. So I do think that, you know, to Jessica's point, Haley Stevens will definitely be trying to work this in somehow, even if there isn't any coordination. It's pretty obvious what they're thinking about.
Yeah, Caroline, I was going to ask that question. How has the AIPAC and Israel issue sort of evolved over the course of this race, and how is this specific race sort of set in the national conversation about the Israel lobby here in America?
Sure. I mean, it's definitely become a focal point. And again, clear division lines between Stevens and El-Sayed. El-Sayed is against, giving additional aid to Israel. In a recent interview on CNN, he dodged a couple questions about whether or not he believed that Israel as a state had a right to exist, and has touted the fact that he is not backed by AIPAC, and has called what's going on in Gaza a genocide. Flip the script over to Haley Stevens. She is not using the term genocide. She is proudly, backed by AIPAC. She just filmed a video for them in March. And so, she's positioning herself as an ally to Israel. I do also think that, to your point about the question of the national broader, what does this mean here? Michigan is also really interesting in that 2 years ago, it was this, home of the uncommitted movement. And I think that it's sort of a big deal in some ways because you do have this, Middle Eastern Senate candidate who might be the nominee at a time when you're seeing frustration from progressives and the Middle Eastern community, Arabs, Muslims in Michigan over, the Biden administration's handling over the war in Gaza, Trump administration's handling over the war in Gaza. But at the same time, you're also having that juxtaposition with Jewish voters who are really concerned, and Democrats writ large, about anti-Semitism, who are worried about these attacks at synagogues. And so you're seeing this push and pull that's playing out in Michigan, both in 2024 and obviously now in the Senate race.
Jessica, what are you seeing out there when it comes to the question of Israel and Gaza and money from AIPAC having influence on this race?
Yeah, I mean, Caroline's right. There are very clear lines of delineation on this issue. And I mean, I think that AIPAC has been demonized on the left, and this would be a major victory for them if they get Haley Stevens, who's been a staunch ally, across the finish line. But I don't think that's the way that we are seeing Democratic primary voters move. But El-Sayed has certainly come under attack for things, not being questioning Israel and different things that I think will also make it into attack lines. I mean, I think that, one person said to me, listen, if AIPAC is an issue for you, you're probably already not voting for Haley Stevens. She did not, in her last debate, which was at the Mackinac Policy Conference, she did not have a good answer at all for the AIPAC defense. And so that's another thing I'm looking for tonight. She needs to have a better answer for that, certainly. So that's a key question I'm looking at, because she knows that attack is coming. She knew it was coming before. So I think that, she needs to have a better answer that is more palatable to the Democratic base, while you can, supporting both or something. But this is a fault line that we are seeing in a lot of primaries and congressional primaries. But the difference is, Michigan is not, the Upper East Side of New York or in Manhattan or Denver even. This is a swing state. And so that is why national Republicans would much rather run against El-Sayed, and why you see Haley Stevens, I think, correctly making the electability argument that she would be the safer candidate to run against the Republican Mike Rogers, who came, just about 19,000 votes short last time. Now, that was a very different environment in a presidential cycle, but he is a good candidate. He's raising better money this time around. So this is not a seat that Democrats can take for granted by any means.
Jeffrey, we have about 2 minutes left before we toss it over to our friends at WOOD TV8 there in Grand Rapids. They are moderating this debate tonight. What are you looking for tonight? Does Haley Stevens have to go out and win this, or is this Abdul El-Sayed just can't lose this debate in your mind?
Well, I think for Haley Stevens, to Jessica's point earlier, she has sometimes struggled on the stump, sometimes struggled when communicating. So she could take advantage of this opportunity, I think, to get a few sort of sound bites of her hitting El-Sayed in a way that comes across as stringing more than two sentences together. That will, I think she'll be able to trumpet that. And to Jessica's point as well, having some answers. I think it's also worth noting that, if I'm El-Sayed, I know that you don't want to talk about electability, but you could, if I'm El-Sayed, I would note that the polling's been really inconsistent in general election polling so far in terms of who would be the better candidate against Mike Rogers. Now, is that because some progressives are saying they're not going to support Haley Stevens? And that if Haley Stevens is the candidate, she might lose some of them, but win over a few more suburbanites and then be a better candidate in the general election? I think there's a lot you could debate on. But if I'm El-Sayed, I might want to have a line or two, and they're countering the idea that she is more electable, and make it not just about a turnout conversation.
Yeah, I would just add too, some of those polls have had some questionable methodology that as well. So, I am looking for some more, some better methodology and polling coming out of Michigan.
New York Times, please poll there.
Yes.
All right. We are certainly hoping to get some numbers once this debate finally comes down tonight. 7:00, Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're just waiting for things to get started there at WOOD TV8 studios. I'm told we are good to go. So let's go ahead and watch the Michigan Democratic primary debate now.
Michigan is the battleground. A state that is shaping the course of a nation, deciding presidential elections.
I always like it when we agree.
Obvious corruption. What is going to happen to check that?
Somebody that's going to serve our local community like Gerald Ford did.
I want roads fixed.
Working for things that are positive for Michigan.
Tonight, night one of debate week. An open U.S. Senate seat. 2 candidates. 2 visions for Michigan. Abdul El-Sayed.
There really is an opportunity to either pick politics as usual or politics is different. And people desperately want politics is different right now.
U.S. Representative Haley Stevens.
I see this as a made-in-Michigan moment. We have a story to tell, and we need a champion in the United States Senate.
Who earns the chance to carry the Democratic banner into one of the most consequential Senate races in the country? The choice is yours. Live from the WOOD TV studios in Grand Rapids and your local election headquarters. This is night one of Debate Week in Michigan, Democratic Senate primary.
Good evening. I'm Rick Albin, your moderator for tonight's debate, along with Amber Krycka, who will be here with viewer questions. Candidates, welcome to you and welcome to viewers across the state watching here on WOOD TV, our sister station, WLNS in Lansing, and partners in Detroit, Marquette, Alpena, Traverse City, and Flint. This truly is Debate Week in Michigan. Here's a quick review of the rules. Each question goes to each candidate for a 60-second response in an order determined by a drawing earlier in this process. A 30-second rebuttal will follow after each candidate has given their initial response. The only possible change to that would be for the final question. Depending on how much time is left in the program, we may eliminate the rebuttal or adjust the length of time to answer the question. There is no opening statement. There will be a 60-second closing. It is time for our first question in Debate Week in Michigan. Again, welcome to both of you. The first question will go to you, sir. The number one issue facing people from coast to coast and right here in Michigan is no surprise. It's inflation, it's affordability. Everything costs too much. You can't fix it all. But if you're elected to the U.S. Senate, tell me one proactive thing you would do to make Michiganders' lives more affordable. 60 seconds, sir.
I've been up and down my state, 110 different cities, 450 public events. No matter where I go, people say the same thing. I just can't afford to live here anymore. I'm so worried about the price of groceries. I can't afford my gas. It's $5. I'm worried about getting sick because I can't afford my deductible. There's a number of things we need to do. Number one, we need to tackle healthcare by guaranteeing everybody healthcare without a deductible, a premium, or a copay through Medicare for all. Number two, we need to stand up to the monopolies and oligopolies that are picking our pockets. Number three, we need to stand up to increase wages. And that means standing with unions like the UAW and the nurses who've endorsed us. It means making sure that we are standing with Michiganders in their moments of crisis by making schools somewhere that our kids can go, by addressing the potholes that cause punctured tires every time you try to drive anywhere. But all of this has to happen by way of getting the corruption out of our politics. So long as corporations are buying politicians, we can't actually enact these solutions because they're getting the policies that they signed up for when they pay for their politicians.
Congresswoman Stevens, 60 seconds, please.
Well, thank you so much, WOOD TV, and to everyone across Michigan tuning in tonight. As your next United States Senator, I will run through anyone and anything to lower costs. My no tariff on groceries bill. My bill to lower your utility bill. Look, I'm the only person running for United States Senate in Michigan who is not a millionaire. I am not trying to sell a book or a podcast. I'm the only only one on this stage who doesn't have a talent agent trying to pitch me for paid speeches. And unlike my opponent, I'm not running at the first mic or camera I see. Instead, my head is down doing the work for the people of Michigan who need the work to be done. We do not need a celebrity senator. We need a workhorse. And as the most effective lawmaker for Michigan in the House of Representatives, if you want a fighter and an effective leader for our state, that's me.
Dr. El-Sayed, 30
We also
seconds.
don't need politicians bought off by corporations. In this race, you've probably seen ad after ad after ad. Not one of those ads was brought to you by the Congresswoman's campaign. All of them brought to you by corporate PACs and AIPAC, trying to buy a politician who's going to do their bidding instead of yours. That's been the story of our politics for far too long. The question is not whether or not you're a millionaire. The question is whether or not you are bowing down to billionaires. And for too long in our politics, we've watched politicians beg for those dollars only to do that bidding when they actually get to office. That has been the story of my opponent. If you want politics is different, I'm the only one who's never taken a dime from a corporation.
Congresswoman, 30 seconds.
Well, look, transparency is oh so important. And this is why I have released my tax returns. My opponent, Abdul, he said that transparency is key, but yet he hasn't released his tax returns. Abdul, you talk about getting money out of politics and putting money in people's pockets, but who is putting money in yours? What are you hiding?
Moving to our next question, it'll be first to you, Congresswoman, with a 60-second response. The Trump administration had been negotiating an agreement to end the conflict in Iran, but within the last hour, we are told that the United States military has launched a series of what they call powerful strikes after commercial ships were struck in the Strait of Hormuz. The question is, what should our policy be going forward with Iran? 60 seconds.
Well, our next United States Senator has one mission and one mission only, and that is to fight for the people of Michigan and represent the people of Michigan's interests. Donald Trump selling us out to this war in Iran that no one asked for, that is raising costs for every Michigander, is totally unacceptable. But here's the deal. In terms of the goal that I have long fought for and pushed for in the United States House of Representatives and what I will work for in the United States Senate, we need long-term peace. Donald Trump has failed us. The Prime Minister of Israel has failed in that regard. And he was just coming after me on this today. Look, I am unafraid, Michigan. You are my North Star, and no illegal wars, no unilateral wars at our expense.
60 seconds.
I think it's worth asking why we got into this war in the first place. There is one man who's been wanting this war fought, and that is the Prime Minister of Israel. And the reason that we've seen this war fought is because the impact of AIPAC in our politics. AIPAC has spent tens of millions of dollars in attack ads against me or ads lying about the Congresswoman's record. They clearly want one individual, and it's not me. And ask yourself why it is that we are paying $5 gas, why it is we can't seem to get out of this quagmire. It's because for too long, our foreign policy has been handed to us by the likes of the State of Israel and AIPAC, who has made sure that Democrats and Republicans are doing their bidding. I don't take that money. They are spending against me because they've called me the most dangerous candidate for the U.S.-Israel relationship, because maybe I don't want to waste our money fighting wars we don't need to spend, and instead I want that spent here to rebuild our schools here, to make sure we have functional infrastructure here in Michigan, to make sure that we have healthcare here in Michigan. And so long as our politicians continue to be bought off by AIPAC, do not be surprised when we fight wars that are in their best interest, to annex Israel, to annex Lebanon, or to do genocide in Gaza.
Congresswoman, 30 seconds.
Well, Abdul, I would say no one is afraid of you. And in fact, the GOP is spending thousands of dollars to prop up your campaign because they think they will make it easier for Mike Rogers to win if you are the nominee. I do not plan to make anything easier for Republicans or Mike Rogers. What I do is I take on tough fights for Michigan, tough races, and I win for us.
30 seconds to wrap up this question.
Well, you know, if Congresswoman Stevens makes it or Mike Rogers wins, either way, Israel will win. AIPAC is perfectly fine with either of my two opponents because they know that they will have a comfortable, reliable vote in the U.S. Senate. If you want politics to work for you, if you want politics to rebuild your schools or fix your infrastructure or to invest in your health care, you have an alternative choice. We're running to get money out of politics, put money in your pocket, and pass Medicare for all. There's a reason that both Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump don't want to see me on the inside of the U.S. Senate, because I'm a threat to politics as usual.
Moving on, but staying in the Middle East, despite a ceasefire, The humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues, and Israel maintains that eliminating Hamas remains essential to its security. What, if any, is the role of the United States in trying to resolve this long-standing impasse? 60 seconds, sir.
I'll tell you this. For a long time, every president has said that they believe in a two-state solution. The problem, of course, is that our policy has been to subsidize the Israeli military to the tune of billions of your tax dollars every single year. And their goal is to foreclose on the possibility of a Palestinian state. I believe in international law. I believe we have to hold every country to international law, which means to me that we need to stop funding the Israeli military in unilateral blank checks. That also includes Egypt. That includes Saudi Arabia. I also believe that we cannot continue to sell weapons to a country that is doing human rights abuses, genocide, and apartheid. I also believe that we need to stop running cover for what has become a rogue state that is now trying to annex southern Lebanon. And I also believe that your money needs to be spent here. Because at the end of the day, the ultimate losers are you and me, the taxpayers who paid that money to provide good infrastructure, build schools, provide healthcare for our own kids, not to watch it get sent to buy bombs and tanks that end up annihilating other people and their children.
Congresswoman, 60 seconds.
The goal has to be long-term peace, and this is what I have long worked for. I stood alongside families who had relatives taken hostage by Hamas, and I called for a permanent ceasefire. The difference between my opponent and myself on this issue is that I believe in a two-state solution. I can say that Israel has a right to peacefully exist alongside the people of Palestine and in Gaza. It is very clear that Mr. Netanyahu has not made us safer, has not brought us closer to peace, and he's endangered Jews here in America and around the world. This is why he was just trashing me today on CNN. I am not afraid of bullies. I am not afraid to stand up, and I continue to stand up for humanitarian aid, for the U.S. to work with the countries in the region and get aid into Gaza.
30 seconds.
Look, I believe in equal rights to peace, dignity, and self-determination for Palestinians and Jewish Israelis alike. But the question I think the Congresswoman needs to answer is, why has she allowed $40 million of outside spending, the bulk of it coming from AIPAC, to come into this race? I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu is attacking her to actually attack her. I think he's attacking her to try and steer away the stink of how staunchly she stands for their policy. So let's take that opportunity. Explain what you've given away for AIPAC support in this race.
30 seconds to wrap up.
No one owns my vote and no one owns my policies. Anyone who is contributing to my Senate campaign is doing so because of my proven record of fighting for Michigan. What I did when I served as chief of staff on the U.S. Auto Rescue, saving 200,000 Michigan jobs, and what I have done to get the CHIPS and Science Act passed and signed into law. What my opponent needs to answer is, why is the GOP spending thousands of dollars to prop up his campaign, saying that he will make Mike Rogers the next U.S. Senator?
All right, we're going to move on. As I told you before we started, we have a lot of viewer questions. Amber Krycka is my colleague, and she will be presenting those. You'll be able to see them there. You'll be able to hear them in the studio. If for any reason they are not clear, let me know and I will repeat them. Here is Amber with our first viewer question.
A lot of questions on this next topic, bipartisanship. This is from Mark Newman. In the spirit of bipartisanship, talk specifically about how you will reach across the aisle. Name a particular project that you will champion that will require working with the opposing party.
Congresswoman, 60 seconds.
Well, I don't have to just talk about what I would do. I can certainly talk about what I have done in terms of passing bipartisan legislation like the CHIPS and Science Act. But to answer our viewers' question very specifically, I have a plan to lessen Michigan and the United States' dependence on China, to lower cost and to create those good manufacturing jobs. That is day one legislation for me in the United States Senate. And look, there is a reason why the Center for Effective Lawmaking recognized me as the most effective lawmaker for Michigan in the Congress, because I fight for us, I win for us. Debbie Stabenow has endorsed my campaign. Our Attorney General Dana Nessel has endorsed me for United States Senate because of their fight for Michigan and their results for Michigan and them seeing the same in me. And so, yes, when we talk about manufacturing, when I bring in my supply chain bill to the floor, I feel really excited about getting other colleagues on the Republican side to join me.
Thank you. Move on. Dr. El-Sayed, 60 seconds.
I'm proud to have been endorsed by the UAW. And the reason that they've endorsed me is because they understand that I am a fighter for working people. I can tell you that there is bipartisan support already to blow up the USMCA, which has been a cancer on our manufacturing industry in Michigan and the industrial Midwest in general. That is a bill, of course, that my colleague actually voted for. And I think there's bipartisan consensus that has been a danger. We have an opportunity to rethink trade policy to make sure that we're protecting good union jobs in this state and in this country. And I think that means rethinking how we do tariffs. Now, Donald Trump's version of tariffs is like chemotherapy, but you give the patient all the chemo at the same time. I think there's an opportunity where you pace it out. You think critically about how you protect critical budding manufacturing industry and that you are transparent with your trading partners about how you do this in an effort to build long-term sustainable manufacturing jobs. I've heard a lot from Republicans saying that they want to bring manufacturing jobs back. Let's roll up our sleeves, work together to get that done.
30 seconds, Congresswoman.
Well, NAFTA was a crap deal, and it hurt a lot of Michiganders. And what is also hurting us right now are Donald Trump's reckless policies that Mike Rogers has said he wants to rubber stamp. There's a reason why the Gordie Howe Bridge isn't open, and Mike Rogers is rubber stamping that. There's a reason why a trade war is going on with Canada. Small businesses all over Michigan losing revenues as a result. I thought he was going to take on China. I've got the bill to do that and to lessen our dependence and grow manufacturing jobs. I've done it once before, and I'll do it again as Michigan's next senator.
30 seconds.
And the reason that the big corporations always get their way when it comes to free trade is because they buy off politicians to do their bidding. Everybody knew USMCA was not going to solve the problem. Everybody knew it. And yet, they bought the votes to get their way. And now you can buy a cheap TV, but you can't find a manufacturing job that can actually feed your family. That is the devastation of corporate-bought politics. As the only candidate who's never taken a dime from a corporation, you know I'm going to stand up for you. It's the reason. Again, the UAW, nurses, AFT have all supported us because when it comes to the choice between working people and corporations, I will pick people every time.
Yeah, and it's the only reason you haven't released your tax returns.
All right.
And 15 labor unions are endorsing me. Thank you. I yield, Rick. Yes.
Amber has another. Sure, go ahead.
Respond?
Quickly, very quickly.
Yeah, I took the same extension that the Congresswoman took every single
year. I'm talking about your tax returns, Abdul. You haven't released your tax returns.
All right.
You don't need an extension to do that.
There's a process.
Who's putting money in your pocketbook?
We're going to move forward with another viewer question. Amber is here with another viewer who wants to know where the two of you stand.
Is the Democratic Party shifting? Joe Beelan has our next question. He says, many of my friends who are Democrats are very concerned with the way the party has shifted so far left that the party no longer accurately represents their views. Will you continue on the current party path, or will you pursue your own path of leadership?
60 seconds for you.
I'll pursue my own path of leadership, educated by the countless days that I spent talking to Michiganders across 110 cities, 450 public events. Now, here's the thing about it. There is no left or right. Most people out there aren't asking, where do I fit on the left-right spectrum? They're asking, can I afford my groceries when I go grocery shopping? What's going to happen if I get sick or my kid gets sick? Why does my kid's school look the same way it did 30 years ago when I went there? And the answer to that question is that for too long, politicians on both sides of the aisle have taken the same corporate corrupting money. I'm the only candidate on this stage, frankly, the only candidate running for U.S. Senate, who's never taken a dime of that money, which is why the real issue is about the people locking you out of your politics versus the people being locked out. And I will stand always on the side of the folks who are locked out. That is a pathway in our politics that I think all of us can get behind. It's not red, it's not blue, it's not Democrat, it's not Republican, it's American. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That is where our politics needs to go. And in the next 250 years, when we get to chart where we go from here, I hope we remember that that's what we need.
60 seconds.
I will run through anything and anyone to deliver for Michigan. We've got to lower the cost. Look, there are many who want to make this run for U.S. Senate about Washington, D.C. insider deals and what's going on with our party leadership. Friends, this is about the future of Michigan. Who is going to be the workhorse? Look, I've got the receipts. I have passed big pieces of legislation. I passed my first bill to secure STEM grants for our K through 12 schools in my first year in Congress. I am ready to hit the ground for our schools, for our educators, and to stand up to the corruption and the abuse of power that we see coming down from Donald Trump. If you want to stop Trump, I'm your gal.
The question was about the direction of the party. Is it shifting?
Well, I'll tell you this. It won't shift if we continue to elect leaders who take money from the same corporations who have broken with the interests of the American public. Chuck Schumer desperately wants one of us to be the next senator, and it's not me. So if you want your politics dictated you by AIPAC or Chuck Schumer, then I'm not your guy. I think we need to go back to the idea of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. $40 million of spending in this race. $40 million. I want you to think about what that means. That's money that buys something on the back end. So if you elect the person who took that money, don't be surprised when they betray you.
Except for, again, I have the receipts as the most effective lawmaker for Michigan. I'm not trying to go viral or get a good tweet out, all right? If you check the facts, the claims that my opponent has made about eradicating medical debt are untrue. If that's all you got to run on, Abdul, well, then good for you.
It's worth noting here that over the weekend, a third candidate that was in this race dropped out. That leaves the two of you. One of you will face Republican Mike Rogers, as you both talked about a little bit here. Congresswoman Stevens, you've been endorsed, as you said, by former Senator Debbie Stabenow, former Governor Jennifer Granholm, and as you said, by the Attorney General. You have, Mr. El-Sayed, been endorsed by Bernie Sanders, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and a number of others. I went to both of your websites, long list of endorsements. Is this race not only about control of the U.S. Senate, which it may well come down to, but is this race also for control of the Democratic Party? Is there something else on the line here? 60 seconds.
Well, I'm not going to let the pundits or the prognosticators make any such determination. For me, this has always been about Michigan. I am the daughter of small business owners who met at Oakland University. My dad is 81 years old and still driving his Ford F-150 with the word Stevens Landscaping on the side, and he's drinking his water. Look, it's that value of hard work, that ethos that I grew up with that has always long motivated my approach to public service. And the reason I have put up my hand to run for U.S. Senate is because of what I'm hearing from Michiganders, because a fully paralyzed veteran reached out to me and asked me if he was still going to get his benefit check because he saw Elon Musk walking around with a chainsaw. I have stood up, I have called these guys out, and I am stopping these abuses of power. And you better believe from the United States Senate, Michigan's voice will be heard with me.
60 seconds.
I never intended to run for office. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor because I could go 15 hours to my family's native Egypt or 15 minutes from where I grew up. I went to medical school only to realize that our healthcare system was, in fact, part of the problem, not part of the solution. I went into public health. We eliminated medical debt. Yes, we eliminated medical debt. We put glasses on kids' faces. We took on corporate polluters. We provided free health insurance. We did the things that for too long government fails to do under leadership that is bought off by corporations. I'm running to do three things: get money out of politics, put money in your pocket, pass Medicare for all. I'm not doing this because of some direction of a party. I'm doing this because of the Michiganders that I've gotten to see. A woman who had cancer 3 times and happened to managed to hold on to her life savings until the 3rd one. A woman who lost her entire life savings because her kid got cancer and died. People who have come and shared their burden with us. If we continue to allow corporations to buy our politicians, do not be surprised when everything gets more expensive and your job gets further out of reach. That is the politics that is corrupting now, and we need different.
30 seconds.
Well, transparency remains really key here. You can see my tax returns. I've made them public. Again, I call on my opponent to do the same because we do need to know who's putting money in your pocket, particularly if you have a talent agency getting you paid speeches. I've been busy doing the work for Michiganders. Period, full stop. Power Outage Relief Act. We're still dealing with that. Small businesses losing their revenues. We got to do supply chain security. I've got a bill for that. I am ready to go for us, Michigan, on day one.
30 seconds to wrap.
Let's talk about power outages. People sleeping in dark rooms without electricity for the 4th straight day. My opponent's taking $37,500 from DTE. Ask yourself what that buys. Our politics have been deeply and profoundly corrupted by corporate money, and I want to get money out. You want to talk about transparency? There's a group called Center Forward that happened to pay for a flight for the Congresswoman and her mother to Portugal. I want to understand what she promised them in return. You want to talk about transparency? Why are there $40 million flowing into our politics right now in support of my opponent?
Yeah. Well, and again, I have the receipts and I have the bill to stand up to the utility companies at the lower rates.
Explain the receipts.
So, yes, I've got the,
You're not
I've got the
explaining
multiple bills.
I'll give you a chance when we come back in a moment. But first, we're going to take a break. And when we come back in 90 seconds, we're going to talk about something that has been discussed a lot in the past few months, and that's immigration enforcement and ICE. That's coming up. But first, we're going to take a break. The candidates will enter the spin room once our debate concludes. There is a QR code right now that will take you to our live post-debate coverage on WOOD TV+. We'll be right back.
All right, everybody, we are in a break
Continue
right
with the questions
now
that we have. Many people have been critical of Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, in the past months regarding their methods, their detention facilities. Both of you on some level had some questions, problems with and about ICE. If not ICE, how could we deal with the estimated millions of people in this country that didn't come through the proper channels, that we don't necessarily know who they are or where they are? I'm going to start with you, Dr. El-Sayed, with 60 seconds. What do we do with that situation?
So I just want to be clear. I went to Minneapolis at the height of Project Metro Surge. I watched as our government laid siege to a city in our own country. It was awful to see. ICE is not about immigration. ICE is not about the southern border. I was on nearly the northern border. ICE is about normalizing paramilitary force on our streets. I've been clear that you can't reform ICE, you can't retrain ICE, you have to abolish ICE. Now, that's not to say that we can't secure our border. That's not even to say that we can't actually enforce our immigration policy. That is to say that we shouldn't do it at the edge of destroying our Constitution itself. ICE is a new agency. It is younger than I am. We have done this in the past in a way that respects the basic rule of law. And if we're serious about actually having a pathway in this country to a humane, thoughtful, common sense immigration system, we've got to invest in the court infrastructure that offers a pathway to citizenship for people who built a life here, and lived here peaceably, and contributed to our society. I think that's the responsibility we need to go to while keeping our southern border safe and secure.
What would we do about ICE in 60 seconds?
Yeah, well, before I jump to the bipartisan border security bill that I do support, it must be said very clearly that Donald Trump's ICE is completely out of control and it is an abuse of power. ICE agents from top to bottom that have committed crimes have to be held accountable, and I've got the legislation to do it. I called on Kristi Noem to go. She was removed, but no reforms took place. They took $70 billion of our taxpayer money into an ICE slush fund. This has been a failure. A temple in my district was blown up. It wasn't ICE that stood up. It was state and local law enforcement. That money needs to be redirected to those law enforcement agencies that are responsible for our safety and security. Donald Trump has abused his power. He has failed the American people, and we need change.
30 seconds for you.
Look, I appreciate the change of tone on ICE. I mean, my colleague voted to thank ICE and increase their budget and also took money from people who run ICE contracts. That to me seems very different than what we're hearing now. I've been deeply clear. I don't take money from corporations. I don't take money from ICE contractors, which is why I can say with a clear voice, we need to abolish ICE. I think we need clarity about where folks' money comes from and what trades they make on the policy on the back end to bob and weave on these issues when these are issues of life and death.
30 seconds to wrap this.
Well, it's really unfortunate yet again to see my opponent pursuing Republican tactics. There was a bill on the House floor to condemn an anti-Semitic terrorist attack that in Boulder, Colorado, that killed an individual and injured a Holocaust survivor. Instead of bringing us together, Republicans put in a cynical point about thanking ICE. I am always going to stand up to violence, and I just wish my opponent wouldn't pursue the cynical approaches of Republicans when we do need to be united.
Amber's back with us with yet another viewer question. Let's do this question, and then we're going to come back to some of this in just a moment. Let's do the question.
Childcare is one of the biggest expenses for the average Michigan family. Jacob Exline, who is an early childhood educator, wants to know, what would your plan be to make childcare more affordable for families as a U.S. Senator?
Congresswoman,
yes.
60 seconds.
I have long championed affordable child care here in Michigan and across this country. And in fact, I was on the phone with the daycare centers and the families when COVID hit, fighting to secure dollars to make sure that daycare centers and the people who work in them stay open and employed. Look, the costs continue to go up. The way in which we can lower daycare costs are through the expansion of CDBG funding and grants that match what our great governor here in Michigan did. I actually went to a daycare center with her in Troy, Michigan to celebrate some of the programs that she put into place. And the other deal that we need is we need paid family leave. I'm a champion for paid family leave. We need to secure the ability for new mothers and fathers to have that precious time with their newborns. That's another critical step. I've got the record.
60 seconds, sir.
I'm a father of two daughters, and the child care for our youngest, who's 3 years old, is one of the most expensive items on our entire budget. It is insane how much people have to pay. And for a lot of folks, this has become a gender justice issue. It's forcing people out of the workforce, predominantly women, and it's holding them behind from lucrative opportunities that they can use to advance their family in the first place. I think we need to make childcare free, 100% free. Now, how do we pay for that? We pay for that by taxing billionaires their wealth. We could render $4.6 trillion if we were willing to put, let's say, an 8% tax on billionaire wealth. This is not that difficult, but it's a function of our values. Do we care enough to make sure that women have access to the workplace, that children have a safe, healthy place to go, or would we rather be the kind of economy that allows billionaires to make a second billion, a third billion, a trillion, maybe like Elon Musk? That is the question we need to answer. And ultimately, so long as we allow billionaires and corporations to buy politicians, we're going to get the wrong answer.
30 seconds.
This Senate seat is considered a toss-up for November, a 50-50 chance that it will go Democrat or Republican. The one thing that I do is I win tough races. I flipped a congressional seat that was long held by a Republican, blue in 2018, and I held it when Donald Trump was on the ballot. Living my values, living the values to make change and improve people's lives. Mike Rogers, he's not going to do a thing to impact child care and make it more affordable for families.
30 seconds.
Look, if you want somebody who's electable, the last 3 polls in a row show that I'm the most electable Democrat in November. Why? Because you got to actually fight for something. It's not enough to offer people 2 options that kind of look the same on the issues that matter the most. If you're taking money from corporations, the same corporations, Democrat or Republican, how different are things really going to be? I'm offering an opportunity to actually invest in what we want to fight for healthcare that is guaranteed, for an economy that works for working people, for finally getting corporate money out of our politics.
Well, with all due respect to Abdul, I think he looks a lot like more like Mike Rogers than I do.
All right. So we have apparently scratched the surface on a couple of differences between the two of you. And this is not scripted, and this is not something that's planned, and the people in the control room are about to pull their hair out. But I want to give you 30 seconds, and I want to give you 30 seconds to pursue whatever this is that's going on here. Obviously, you've got a question about some of the money in her campaign. You've got a question about some of the money in his pocket. Yeah. 30 seconds, go.
Well, look, my opponent wants to make this race about lies and attacking my integrity and the work that I have done for the people of Michigan. Look, I was the person from Michigan on the team working on President Obama's auto rescue. I have a proven track record that I am proud of fighting for this state, standing up to special interests, and I have 15 labor unions standing alongside me in this fight and some other proven individuals as well. So can we stop the lies, and can we get the transparency out that my opponents long talked about?
I'd love to stop the lies that are being told on TV by organizations like the Center for Democratic Priorities, which, by the way, didn't exist until it started to run ads for my opponent. Like the United Democratic Progressives, which, by the way, is a front for AIPAC. Like Center Forward, which bought airline tickets for my opponent, for her mother and herself to go to Portugal. I don't know what they talked about. I don't know what they did. So if we want to talk about lies, I think it's really important for us to understand who's paying for them and what was said on the back end to allow them to be told. Because $40 million, it doesn't come for free.
So is the GOP...
I'm glad we got that all cleared up. So we're going to get back to these questions. I want to talk about data centers for a minute. I'm going to give you a premise. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but here's my premise. Data centers are going to be built somewhere no matter what happens in Michigan. So the question is, are we better off to have some of those centers here, or should they be actively opposed, as they have been by many citizens in meeting after meeting across the state? And it's first to you, sir. 60 seconds.
Look, right now people are scared to death that there's going to be this gigantic data center put in their backyard so people like Mike Rogers can make gender-affirming videos about how buff they really are. I think we have to be serious about the fact that these pose real dangers, and the people who are pushing them are the richest, most powerful corporate CEOs in the history of our economy. And so we've put forward a terms of engagement. We want to make sure that if you want to put a data center anywhere, that it's going to meet the following terms: all union labor, no raising our utility rates, increasing our utility reliability, not touching our water, and then there has to be a community benefits agreement that's negotiated in good faith with all the money put up in escrow, and this has to be fully enforceable, including shutting down the data center. That has to be passed at the federal level. Now, here's the thing. Big AI has huge super PACs that guess who they're funding, not me, the other person on this stage. And so the question for us is, are we willing to actually do what it takes to protect people from these risks? Or are we going to let them roll us, just like corporations continue to roll our politicians over and over again?
Congresswoman, 60 seconds.
Yeah, well, look, the citizens need to be heard on innovation and data centers. And it is up to federal lawmakers to secure the tax code so that these gajillionaire enterprises are paying their fair share. It is unacceptable that rates would go up as a result. I want to force these data centers to pay the utility bills and to pay water bills for folks. And look, I also want to secure Michigan being on the forefront of innovation and manufacturing. I visited hundreds, uniquely, hundreds of manufacturing shop floors. They are using this technology. We want the jobs. We just can't afford to force the workers to pay for it. And look, yet again, my opponent takes jabs, except for he won't denounce the GOP when they are funding his operation and his candidacy, and now bragging about the false polls that they're putting out that he's going to be the best one to beat Mike Rogers. That's me.
30 seconds.
I'm sure everybody out there thinks that Republicans really want me to win this race. Sure. The real question is, how much money has the AI industry spent in this race? And why are they spending it? And whose vote are they buying? And what does that mean for you? If you want a future where AI is fully unregulated, where we lose, 50% of our jobs, where a data center sits in your backyard, you have a choice. If you want someone who's going to stand up for the people against the corporations, you also have a choice. Notice, none of the answers actually speak to any of the points I'm making about the money that is being spent in these races to corrupt our politics.
30
because
seconds.
I have receipts, and the people who are watching this need to evaluate who is running for U.S. Senate, the chief lawmaking role in this country that has the record, that is not a show horse, that is not, I am not someone trying to go viral and shouting into a bullhorn about problems. I am delivering. That is not something my opponent can say. He's great at attacking, and he's great at covering up that his father-in-law is running his super PAC that's spending millions of dollars for him.
All right. Going to move on to a question that you have both addressed, because these go together. And this one will go first to you, Congresswoman. We hear a lot about AI, artificial intelligence, hear about it every day. I doubt that most of us have a really good grasp of exactly what it is, what role it's going to play in our lives going forward, what role the government has in putting guardrails on technology that few fully understand, that could be a positive game changer that is evolving all of the time and is displacing workers already. We know that that's happening. So should the government jump in the business of regulating AI? 60 seconds.
Yeah, and look, Abdul is lying. Again, he has a super PAC that is run by his father-in-law that has spent millions of dollars on his behalf, and the GOP is also spending money. It's good to know that his father-in-law isn't involved with AI. Here is the deal. I passed my first AI bill into law in 2020, all right, in my first term in Congress. I have supported resources to invest and protect in the privacy for consumers and to stand up for the little guy, particularly small businesses who need equitable investment, Black-owned businesses like ones I visit on the regular, who oftentimes are getting the short end of the stick, and they certainly are from Donald Trump. I want to make sure that resources are coming into our communities and that jobs are protected and maintained. We can do this here in Michigan. We just need the right leadership, and I believe that is me.
Do we need to regulate AI? 60 seconds.
Absolutely. First, I just want to be clear. The National Nurses United is not my father-in-law. Working Families Party is not my father-in-law. The UAW is not my father-in-law. But I also want to speak to the fact that we do need to regulate AI. And so long as we are taking money, the party is taking money from the AI industry, it's not likely to happen. I proposed a plan putting AI under democracy. What does that mean? That means that I want to make sure that legacy internet companies no longer own the means of creating AI. That AI corporations are spun off as public interest corporations, and that at least 50% of their boards are publicly appointed, meaning through the democratic process. I also want real clear guardrails on what AI can and can't do. I want an agency in the government like an FDA for AIs. And I want to make sure that we pass our terms of agreement. I can say all this because I'm not bought off by the AI companies. You talked about that 2020 regulation. That was a giveaway to the AI industry. So yes, if you want someone who's really effective at giving giveaways to the AI industry, you have your option in this race.
30 seconds.
Well, I'm pleased that my opponent read my deep fake bill to better detect the use of AI, particularly with our children. It was written alongside the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and I am proud that that passed. And you should be supporting it, not attacking it. But that seems to be the only thing and stunt that he can pull while the GOP is supporting his campaign. And look, I worked really hard to make sure that Kamala Harris was going to get elected and that Donald Trump would be stopped. And my opponent did nothing.
I don't know what Kamala Harris has to do with AI, but I want to speak to the fact that right now we have a choice. $40 million. We're being outspent 30-1 in this race, 30-1. That money is coming in from AIPAC. Their goal is to make sure that our money is sent abroad to kill other people rather than kept here to invest here. Now, the question you might be asking is, what does it have to do with a question about AI? Government will continue to work for the people who buy off government so long as we allow people to buy off government. It is that simple. And you're seeing a case in point of that.
This next question is one that I take very seriously. I suspect many of the viewers do as well. The national debt is more than $39 trillion. $39 trillion. Now, the interest on that debt's about $1 trillion a year. CBO says by 2036, it'll be about $2 billion a year. That'll be about 25% of every dollar that comes into the national treasury. What do we do to begin to reduce this burden that will be passed along to your children and likely their children? Would you raise taxes? Would you vow to cut spending? What would you do? 60 seconds.
Look, as everyday Michiganders know, that a budget sheet is about money in and money out. And for a long time, folks on the conservative side want to tell us that it's all about money out. We're spending too much. But then they do two things. They cut taxes for the richest people in society, and then they cut things like healthcare. And guess what happens? They fight wars that we don't need to fight. So money out goes up, money in goes down, and we run up the national debt. And then Democrats show up, and we're trying to be effective stewards of the national debt. So here's what we need to do. We need to run the play in reverse. How about we end stupid wars we shouldn't be fighting at the behest of foreign governments? How about we start taxing billionaires their wealth so that we can return trillions of dollars to the economy? And how about we invest our money in the things that people actually need, like good education, childcare, good hospitals, and healthcare? Those are the opportunities we have in front of us, so long as we don't allow the same corporations and billionaires to buy our politicians so that they keep doing these ridiculous things.
60 seconds.
Our national debt keeps me up for Michiganders, and it is very serious, in part because it is mortgaging the future of our children. And the way in which we get out of our debt and deficit mess is by taxing the growing billionaire class and forcing them to pay their fair share. We are growing our economy, except for it's just with the very, very few who aren't paying their fair share. If you listen to Donald Trump, who my opponent just admitted he didn't do anything to help stop him from getting elected, he wants to do everything for the billionaire class. Donald Trump did tax cuts for them while cutting our food assistance and our health care benefits. It's not acceptable, and it's not working. We can't look at the middle class here in Michigan and force them to keep paying. People can't pay their bills right now. People are underwater. I've had 2 working moms in the last day tell me that. It doesn't work.
30 seconds.
Look, I just want to be clear. I endorsed Vice President Harris. I campaigned for Vice President Harris. I really wanted Vice President Harris to win this race. Now, ask yourself why we were where we were. Because for too long, our policy has been wrong on a number of critical issues. And it's been wrong because of the role of special interests in our politics. The same exact special interests who get their way when it comes to our tax system. The same exact special interests that have us fighting stupid wars we shouldn't be fighting. The same special interests who are funding my opponent.
30 seconds for you.
Well, look, leadership is going to get us out of our debt and deficit mess. And as someone who has my finger on the pulse of the needs of the middle class here in Michigan, you and your family, and I have the receipts and the track record of standing up for you when it matters, when 200,000 Michigan jobs were on the line, when General Motors and Chrysler were going to go bankrupt, and I worked on that initiative to save your jobs and those jobs. Look, we can use tax dollars effectively without letting our country go bankrupt.
Here's another question that Amber has for us, and this one kind of goes along with what we're talking about. Here's Amber.
Social Security is a top issue for many Michiganders. This next question is from Mark Luxford. As a senior, Social Security is a very important issue to me. What is your opinion of the proposal to guarantee adequate funding for this critically important program by raising, or better yet, eliminating the income cap for the FICA tax that funds Social Security?
60 seconds, Congressman.
Well, I fully endorse that proposal of eliminating the FICA cap and making sure that folks are paying their fair share. What is going on with Social Security right now is another example of how Donald Trump and the billionaire class believe that they can rob our Social Security trust fund and force the middle class to pay for the crisis that we are going to be in. We can fix this. I have also stood up to Donald Trump today and said, rehire the Social Security workers that you have fired, because my constituents, they're on the phone trying to get access to their disability benefit, their retirement benefit, and no one's picking up. And again, these are programs that folks have paid into. I believe in it. Mike Rogers, Donald Trump, they're going to sell us down the Potomac River.
60 seconds.
I've talked to so many seniors who are struggling. They're struggling because they paid their home off 30 years ago, but the property tax is getting too high. Their premium on their Medicare is unaffordable, and their Social Security just doesn't cut it. And they're worried they might lose that Social Security. So yes, absolutely, we have to lift the cap. It would make Social Security sustainable, but we've got to go further. I think we need to be eliminating the premiums, the copays, and the deductibles on Medicare, and we need to make Medicare fully sustainable by extending it to everybody. Medicare for all would do exactly that. On top of that, I think we need to be freezing property tax for seniors. If you paid off your home at some point, we can't expect you to keep up with property taxes that are going up. Now, how do we pay for that? Well, again, if we tax billionaires their wealth, if we were to invest in the Department of Education so that we're paying centrally for public schools in an equitable way, there are a lot of opportunities for us to lift the burden off of seniors who've done their job. They've worked extra hard. They deserve a dignified retirement, and we've got to be thinking about how to offer them that.
Congressman, 30 seconds.
They are bankrupting the Social Security Trust Fund. It is unconscionable and wrong, and Michigan is going to have a choice about who it sends to the United States Senate to do something, who's got the vision long-term for a 6-year term to tackle a tough issue, and that is what I have done. Over and over again. I have a plan for Social Security, a plan to be able to work across the aisle if need be, and most importantly, stand up to Donald Trump and Elon Musk in this moment.
30 seconds.
Look, I'm here to serve you. I'm somebody who worked in the bowels of city and county government. Those are the kind of jobs where you can't dodge tough issues. You got to show up Monday through Friday and Saturday and Sunday too. You've got to make sure people get the services that they need and deserve. And I know in places like DC, they look down on people who work in local government. But I also think that we need that viewpoint in the U.S. Senate right now. We also need the viewpoint of a doctor, somebody who understands what it's like to make sure that you look people in the eye and deliver for them. And I think we haven't had that viewpoint, frankly, in a Democrat since 1969. I aim to offer that.
This is going to be our final question. We're going to limit this answer to 45 seconds. There will be a rebuttal, but 45 seconds on the main question. The current economic tensions with China have created concerns that range from cheap electric vehicles being flooded into some international markets to military concerns over the buildup of China's armed forces and the dependence of our own military on Chinese goods and services. Should we be working to lessen our dependence on China, and how should we deal with a major competitor as well as a major trading partner? 45 seconds.
My dad moved to this country to learn to make cars, and he believed in this place. He immigrated from Egypt, the place where that was not possible. And he chose to come here because this was a place where innovation, ingenuity, those were unleashed. We had the mighty UAW who was empowered to make the cars that people like my dad would design. The challenge, of course, is that corporatism has gotten in the way. I remember when my dad came home in 1996 and said, a company that's more interested in finance than it is in engineering is not going to be a car company very long. Fast forward, 2008, there we were. I think we need to make sure our corporations think long-term. I think we need to make sure that we are using trade as an effective way to empower and protect our manufacturing capacity. And then I think we need to unleash ingenuity by investing in research and development for the future. This needs to continue to be the most innovative place, and Donald Trump has sold that way far away.
45 seconds.
Well, to every engineer watching tonight, I know how a CNC machine works and a robotic welder. I am Michigan's manufacturing geek, and nothing is motivating me more than standing up for our manufacturing sector and our jobs, and that means taking on China. Look, I've got the bill. One I also did with Senator Slotkin. No Chinese Cars Act. We have to stop these guys from coming in to our market, lowering costs up the wazoo that only feeds their Communist Party. That's not correct. That's not going to work for us in Michigan. We can build affordable cars here in Michigan without having the Chinese come in and eat our lunch. Not on my watch.
30 seconds.
There's a reason that the UAW has endorsed me in this race. And they endorsed me in this race because I understand that the biggest challenge we have right now, the thing that is throttling our ingenuity, is the fact that our corporations are a lot more interested in a quarterly bottom line than they are in the long-term sustainability of manufacturing. I think we need to think differently. That means standing up to Wall Street, not taking their money to run your campaigns. And at the end of the day, the reason I believe in money out of politics, then money in your pocket and Medicare for all, is because as long as we're taking money from those corporations, we are not going to regulate them.
30 seconds.
Look, I have taken on Vladimir Putin when he stole my constituent, Paul Whelan, and held him in a Russian prison for 5.5 years. I am taking on China now and standing up for our jobs and not letting them flood our markets through the north or the south. Their technology cannot come in here. This is about our way of life in Michigan. This is squarely why I am running for U.S. Senate, to articulate this and defend it and protect it at the lawmaking table.
Time to wrap up this debate, if you can believe it already. You've done a great job in keeping within your time frame. I'll ask you to stay at 60 seconds with closing statements, beginning with you.
We just celebrated our 250th anniversary. I know what my life would have been without the opportunity to be born here. I saw that firsthand in summers in Egypt. I know what America can do for somebody. I also knew that 15 miles away, there were kids who never got that same opportunity. We have to build an America that can be what it was for me, for all of her kids. And that means we've got to take on the ways that corporate greed have gotten in the way. We need to stand with working people, stand with unions. We need to take on oligopolies and billionaires. We need to guarantee health care through Medicare for all. Across my time touring this state, town hall after town hall, you could be in a church in Detroit, you can be in a living room in Lansing, a VFW hall in Escanaba. People say the same things. It just shouldn't be this hard. Shouldn't be this hard to afford your groceries. Shouldn't be this hard to pay your rent. Shouldn't be this hard to see a doctor in the richest, most powerful country in the world. And that means we've got to build a movement of people to get money out of politics, put money in your pocket, and pass Medicare for all. I hope that you'll join us in building that movement. It's the many versus the money.
Congresswoman, 60 seconds.
I am fed up and fired up. I am fed up with Michiganders getting screwed over by bad policies that are coming down from the Trump administration that do not understand the first thing about us and that are raising our costs and impacting our way of life and coming for our jobs. I am fired up, though, to be your next U.S. Senator. I am fired up to lead for us on day one and when it matters, and to be in this fight alongside you and your families. All 83 counties in this incredible state of ours, the largest state geographically east of the Mississippi, deserves its workhorse. And that is me. That is why I am on this campaign trail, listening to you, hearing you, and leading in that order. That is my ethos. That is why I am running. Let's go beat Mike Rogers, send him back to Florida a second time, and make sure that Michigan shines at the lawmaking table.
Candidates, thank you both for being here. I know it takes a lot of time and effort to do it. I know you know how much I appreciate it. I just want to make sure I say it publicly to both of you. I want to thank Amber and all of my colleagues here at WOOD TV, our corporate staff who has been doing a great job and helping us from the get-go, to all of our partners around the state that are carrying this debate tonight. And particularly, I want to thank everybody who has just been here on the ground and helping us. A reminder to join us back here on Thursday night for a debate with the Republican candidates for governor. Good night from Grand Rapids.
Thank you.
All right, we have been watching the Michigan Democratic primary debate between Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens, the incumbent congresswoman. I told our producer, Tom, to hold on this shot because I was wondering if they were going to go shake hands at the end of the debate as you see the credits roll. So as things stand here from the Hill Studios, we did not see them shake hands. But look, it was a feisty debate. I wouldn't call it spicy. I think both of them did a pretty good job of letting the other one finish. Big shout out to Rick Albin and the team at WOOD TV8 for moderating what was a very nice, very organized and engaging and informative debate. So we're going to spend the next 32 minutes or so breaking it all down with a host of friends that are joining us here in Washington, D.C. Julia Mueller is here next to me, campaign reporter for The Hill, and Robbie Suave, co-host of Rising as well. Good evening to you both. Julia, I'll start with you. Just your top line headlines, highlights from the hour-long debate we just watched?
Yeah, I think this debate, now that we're down to 2 leading candidates on the Democratic primary, I think this debate reinforced what people had started to view the race as after Mallory McMorrow exited this week, as a proxy battle between, the progressive left Abdul El-Sayed and then the more establishment, moderate, centrist Stevens. And they both leaned into those attack lines tonight. El-Sayed sort of pitching his opponent as trying to tie her to the establishment. We had Stevens flexing her experience in elected office and on Capitol Hill, but then also raising concerns that El-Sayed, if he wins, could make it easier for Republicans to win this seat, which is a must-win for Democrats.
Yeah, Robbie, 2 words come to mind: purchase power. El-Sayed kept saying Haley Stevens was bought and paid for, and Haley Stevens kept saying, I have the receipts from my work in Congress. What did you make of that debate? Did it play out how you expected it to play out now that you did have that one-on-one challenge with McMorrow dropping out? And make sure you unmute yourself, Robbie. Make sure we get that taken care of. Tom, is that on our end or his end? Nope, can't hear you. Can't hear you just yet. All right, Julia, you answer that question then. What did you make of that constant going back to the well by El-Sayed? Haley Stevens is bought and paid for, and her sort of turning it around and saying, look, I'm not being bought and paid for. I'm already in Congress, and I'm doing the work that Michiganders want me to do in Congress.
Yeah, I think that again, it really crystallized what I think we're going to continue to see in the weeks leading up to this primary, now that these candidates are in a bitter, 2-person jostle for the nomination here. And I think that, El-Sayed leaned into this line. Again, it helped to sort of tie Stevens to establishment, repeat some criticisms that we've been hearing from progressive, anti-establishment candidates across the country this cycle as they sort of try to rev up support and excitement among voters who want to see a change to the status quo.
All right, let's try Robbie again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there's the sweet dulcet tones of one Robbie Suave. What'd you make of this debate, my friend?
By the way, I made a rookie mistake. I got a new microphone and just assumed it would work, and of course it didn't. As for the debate, I think Haley Stevens was making the electability argument, pointing to the fact that Mike Rogers, the Republican opponent, would rather be up against Abdul El-Sayed. And that's true. The problem is, primary voters on both sides of the political spectrum do not care about that argument, is what I'm learning. That just carries no water with them. Democratic primary voters are mad at the establishment. They think the party has been led astray by its leadership. They don't want to hear that some small number of Republicans actually like Haley Stevens better, so they should go with her. That is not an argument that is going to work. So if that's the pitch, it's just not going to go anywhere. You got to be railing against that establishment. That's what fits the mood of Democratic primary voters. So while I personally think it's actually a perfectly good argument, and more voters would be well advised to listen to it, both sides would pick up more Senate seats if they were more disciplined. Their primary voters, at least. That's not going to cut it. I don't believe it.
Julia, they asked about Israel and AIPAC. They asked about bipartisanship, leadership, the future of the Democratic Party, AI and data centers. Any issue really stand out in your mind as a sort of flashpoint in this debate?
I thought, all of those issues really stood out, of course, but I thought one interesting moment in the debate was when the moderator sort of acknowledged he was going off script a little bit and asked the candidates to differentiate themselves. There was another point where the moderator pointed to endorsements that both these candidates have, Bernie Sanders and AOC for El-Sayed, and the former senator, former governor for Stevens, and asked them both, is this race about something bigger than just this race? Is, sort of suggesting, alluding to, how must win this is, how important it is to the party. And he asked, is there something else on the line here? Is this a race for control of the Democratic Party and its direction? Stevens said she wasn't going to let the pundits or the prognosticators make that determination. It's always been about Michigan. El-Sayed said similar. He said he's not doing this because of some direction of the party. But at the same time, I think that's how a lot of people are viewing this and other races races this cycle. You know, with Democrats looking for new leadership, this race again sort of offers a test of appetite for voters of what approach they want.
Robbie, same question. Anything stick out to you on a particular issue that they were asked about?
Not really. I think it comes down to, again, the anger at the leadership and also how he's portraying her as a, you know, tool of AIPAC, something that Democratic primary voters are very angry about, you know, so-called Israel influence on what's going on. Michigan, which is the state, my birth state, by the way, is such an interesting place because on one hand, you can certainly see the argument that, you know, this is a state that that voted for Trump in the last election. This is a swing state, very down the middle state. So it would behoove Democrats to have a more moderate candidate if they're going to win in a state that Trump won, right? That's on paper, that makes sense. On the other hand, Michigan does have a large Arab American population that was dissatisfied with Kamala Harris specifically over the Gaza issue and voted, if not for Trump, in record numbers for the Green Party candidate. So they basically did, you know, opted out of voting for Kamala. So this might be the one state where, despite it being a middle of the road swing state, it does not help the Democratic candidate to be more moderate on this specific issue. So I was referring to the electability argument a minute ago. I mean, I think that is a real downside that Haley Stevens has in that state specifically, which is why frankly, I don't expect her to win this primary at all.
Julia, for the McMurrow voters out there who are now in play for both of these candidates, did you hear anything, or were there any moments where Stevens or El-Sayed really sort of spoke to those voters who maybe agree with both candidates 80, 90% of the time, but be it on economic issues or cultural issues, you know, some things may be bridged too far? Did any candidate tonight sort of maybe pull some of those voters in?
Yeah, the question of where McMurrow's voters go, as well as I think there are questions about where her money might go now that she's out of this race. You know, tonight was important for, you know, and we don't know yet, you know, about the viewership of this, but tonight was important in terms of both these candidates being able to make pitches to those McMurrow voters. McMurrow was trying to operate in sort of the middle ground between the two, which was a difficult lane for her, and, you know, contributed probably to her struggling to gain more traction. And I think both candidates, you know, you mentioned watching to see them shake hands, but tonight was very, you know, there was a lot of sparring early on, but it was a pretty cordial debate. There wasn't a lot of crosstalk or fighting over each other. They both definitely took their jabs, stuck to their talking points, and, you know, had some attack lanes in there. But it was, you know, relatively cordial, I thought. And I think that, you know, that in and of itself may have been a tactic in mind in terms of reaching these McMurrow voters who were looking more toward the middle, you know, maybe had things in common with both candidates, trying to make that approach there.
Robbie, Abdul El-Sayed, not a card-carrying member of the Democratic Socialists of America, though he did mention that he is endorsed by the Working Families Party. Did you hear anything tonight that, you know, maybe sounded a lot like DSA? I think, to me, what stood out was the very first answer he gave. He talked about passing Medicare for all if he is ultimately elected to the Senate, which, just given the math in the building, is a bit of a pipe dream. But did you hear anything, some red meat maybe out there for the far left progressives in this race who may still be undecided?
Oh, I think any far left progressives out there are perfectly happy with this candidate. I mean, he speaks to them very well, not just on, you know, Medicare for all, but as I mentioned a moment ago, laser focus on Gaza. I mean, he chose Hassan Piker to be his most prominent campaign spokesperson. I just read a statement from him about the Graham Planner situation, which, among all the people jumping off the Graham Planner wagon, which is basically everyone at this point, Cenk Uyghur's like out by himself. It was a tepid stepping off of the Graham Planner wagon at that. I think it shows you that this is, you know, a rather progressive, quite to the left a figure in the mold of some of these people who've won primaries in New York and Colorado and so on. And that fits the mood of the Democratic primary electorate. These very progressive, these far left people are beating out, progressives. I mean, and Haley Stevens is quite moderate as far as Democratic candidates go. You could see a world where he'd be trouncing a candidate that was much, much, much more progressive than she is, because that's the anger the electorate has. No, I think he's, whether he calls himself part of the DSA, I think he's a candidate who is very comfortable in that mold, who knows to focus on the issues that matter most to them, Medicare for all, a kind of relentlessness, some would say obsession with bringing up Israel's influence and so on. And that's when you talk about those things, solely those things, if you're associated with Hassan Piker and the DSA. These are all deliberate choices that will very likely to be politically successful, at least in the short term.
Julia, you cover campaigns for The Hill, so I'll ask you, after a debate, what are some of the things that you look for in terms of a candidate being able to sort of harness any momentum that they build up during the debate, or maybe trying to change a narrative after the debate?
The first place to look is on social media, because they're depending on how many people tune in on the actual night of, there is a lot more to gain in terms of potential viral moments and traction online from pieces of the debate that go viral, or the candidate themselves spread. So I'd look and be watching how people are responding to this online, and what particular moments from a video or from the stage gain traction, and then the candidates themselves will clip either their own performances or the performances of their opponent, and try to hammer that, spin it into an ad, and I think that's something to keep an eye on in the next couple hours and this week, as they both try to use this debate as their reach out to these McMurrow voters, or to voters who haven't made up their minds yet.
Robbie, how would you expect, if you were a strategist for either of these campaigns, at this point, do you think this is Abdul El-Sayed's race to lose? Or is Haley Stevens, maybe depending on where these McMurrow folks go, maybe have a lane here, even though we are in this sort of anti-establishment environment?
The pundit in me wants to play this up as still anybody's game, and maybe a debate can make a difference, but I'm doubtful, my friend. He's well ahead, and the more progressive candidate is winning in the Democratic primary time and time again. So I'm just reading the tea leaves here. And again, Michigan is the one place where I think him being so much further to the left on the Israel issue could really advantage him. And this is a state, it's an unusual state. This is a place that Bernie Sanders defeated Hillary Clinton in a primary in 2016, when no one saw that coming. He was a much more progressive person than her, running on some of these same issues. He was the first to bring some of these issues that an Abdul El-Sayed cares about to the forefront. So I think the stars would have to align for it to not go his way, given everything that's happening. And maybe that means the general election is a little bit more competitive, or maybe it doesn't. We'll have to see.
Juliana, not like tonight, after watching this debate, after seeing where the polls are, if you're, the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee, are you having some heartburn about Michigan now? Or do you, to Robbie's point, think, okay, if El-Sayed's going to be the candidate here, we're going to need his grassroots support to really come through, because this could be an uphill battle when it comes to electability against Mike Rogers?
Yeah, well, speaking of, standout lines from the night, I think that was a particular attack line that Stevens made over and over, was, saying that El-Sayed is the candidate that, Republicans want or will make this race easier. That was something that she was arguing. And I think Democrats across the board are, maybe having heartburn about this race and others in light of, what's happening in the Maine Senate race as well. There's just some, heightened stakes across the board, making all of these races even more important. There's all the numbers about how many seats Democrats need to net. But, any changes, and we see things so far this cycle change very quickly and sometimes unexpectedly in these races. So I think, I would expect the Democrats are on guard in this race and elsewhere, and just in light of, everything that's coming out and these, changes, even like McMurrow exiting the race.
Robbie, same question. If you're the Democratic, the DNC, Democratic Party, how are you feeling right now about the Michigan race? And we should say, look, now that you have to factor into the Senate math, what might happen in Maine?
Right. I mean, I think my attention is mostly focused on Maine. Obviously, that's the situation continuing to give me heartburn, although, frankly, the upside of all this, I know it's a little callous just to focus on the horse race aspects of it. There were very serious allegations made against Graham Plattner, but honestly, a different candidate, probably any other candidate, is going to be more competitive against Susan Collins in that race, is where we've come to. So maybe the National Party is relieved they have an opportunity, or seem like they're going to have an opportunity to swap in a stronger candidate. With Abdul El-Sayed, there's not been any suggestion, not a hint of any, scandal or anything of that nature. He's not someone with a very significant public profile, but a much more significant public profile than, Graham Plattner, who was totally unknown until this race. So, I don't think they're necessarily worried about any of that, although, Haley Stevens is more tested in those terms, having been elected to Congress previously. But I think they're looking at that race with interest. I think they're probably saying that they're hoping the national environment is so anti-Trump right now, his approval's down, that, Michigan, a state he narrowly won in 2024 but lost in 2020, is trending back in a 2020 direction, and that they're going to feel strongly about whichever Democrat they have. They might be sweating a little bit at the idea of the Republicans running so many ads about, again, Hassan Piker said America deserved 9/11, and Abdul El-Sayed is his best friend and chose him to be the campaign surrogate. That stuff can have an effect, maybe, or maybe not. We'll see.
Let's go ahead and bring in Jerome Zhao, prediction market experts, with us on this Tuesday night. And Jerome, I'll ask you to share your screen because I love being able to talk to somebody who is deep into the prediction markets. How have things changed with this race now that you do have McMurrow out of it and her voters sort of in play here?
Yeah. So, share my screen. I think McMurrow's exit actually did not impact the markets that much. I think prior to her officially leaving, you could see she is the orange right here. She was actually favored in the market back in March when it looked like, she was taking kind of that middle road between Stevens and El-Sayed. Maybe she could get the sort of large pool of voters who were in between, who cared about, electability, but also wanted someone who was more sort of progressive, populist, that kind of vibe. Things did not really pan out that way. And, before dropping out, she's at like a 1% chance. At this point, markets think this is El-Sayed's race to lose. In part from some of the polls that have come out showing him maybe slightly ahead, but also I think people are pricing in this expectation that the energy on the Democratic side in primaries after New York City, after Colorado, is really with the populist progressive left instead of the more establishment, maybe more centrist wing of the party. And you can see that not only here but also in other primaries like Missouri's 1st congressional district, where Cory Bush's chances of winning, beating Wesley Bell, actually surged following New York and Colorado as well. So it's part of a broader trend, I think, that people are seeing within this Democratic Party primary season.
Robbie, before we let you go, my friend, I'll give you the mic for a second. What are you looking for? Here we are, July 7th. I think, maybe 26 or so legislative days left until the midterm elections. From a Senate standpoint, because this was a Senate debate, would you rather be Republicans right now, or would you rather be Democrats?
That's a tough one. It's as close as it can be. Honestly, before this most recent round of Fetterman news, I think not Fetterman, excuse me, Graham Platter news, I would have rather been the Republicans, because I was pretty confident in Susan Collins to hold that seat, given that Platter was going to be her opponent. I now think they will have time, unless Platter decides, I don't need to leave, you can't make me. It sounds like he's probably going to leave, and that, I think, actually ends up helping the Democrats, makes that Collins race just a little bit more difficult. Before that, I was thinking they're very likely to hold, Republicans are likely to hold that seat. Texas, still an unknown. I mean, if Collins wins, it's over for the Democrats anyway. So that's really game over. Now that's looking maybe a little bit more favorable to Democrats. If Abdul El-Sayed picks this up, if Tallarico pulls out something, I don't know. It is really close. It's genuinely a nail biter, and I'm not sure at this point. I guess I still probably maybe very narrowly by a smidge like the Republicans' chances to keep the Senate, but I would not be surprised either way.
Yeah, look, it is an eternity until November 3rd. So anything can happen between now and then for sure. Robbie, thank you for your time tonight, my friend. Get some sleep because I know you got an early morning tomorrow. We appreciate the insight as always. Jerome and Julia are going to stick with me. Jerome, you read my mind because I wanted to see what was going on in terms of the generic ballot, especially in the Senate when it comes to prediction markets. What have you seen over maybe the last month or so with where, bettors think this thing is going?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is the generic ballot, the general environment hasn't shifted too much in favor of Democrats or Republicans, right? There's maybe a small bump in Trump's approval rating, perhaps from the Iran ceasefire, maybe from some of the, July 4th or the World Cup celebrations, sort of like a small summer high. The fluctuations you've seen in this chart have mostly been due to individual races, I think. Democrats need a lot to go right. As Robbie said, they need to hold Michigan. They need to flip North Carolina, which looks fine so far, and Maine, because Maine is, the actually only Senate seat that Harris won in 2024 that a Republican holds. And then there's these 4 other states, which are all kind of, Trump plus 11 to Trump plus 14 states, right? Those are, Alaska, Iowa, Texas, and I'm missing one of them. Alaska, Iowa, Texas.
Maybe Ohio? Maybe?
Ohio, yes, that's right, exactly. So the fascinating thing here is because they're all kind of clustered around that mark, if the generic ballot improves by a couple points, right, that could net Democrats 2 or 3 of those. If it, sort of becomes recedes a little bit in terms of the blue wave, Democrats could end up very narrowly losing all 4 of them. Even with a good generic ballot result otherwise. So that is something where each state has its own sort of individual, characteristics. Some of them have stronger candidates. Some of them have former senators running. But overall, I think as a whole, those 4 Democrats need at least 2 of them. And that's what makes it so hard, is because these are inherently Republican-leaning states, but they're all seen as toss-ups at the moment by the markets.
Yeah, Julia, this was always going to be an uphill battle for Democrats. When you're out there talking to your sources, what races are giving, Democratic strategists a little bit of heartburn, where they may be seeing a little bit of optimism?
Yeah, well, there was some interesting new polling from the New York Times in the past couple of days from a number of competitive Senate races. And Democrats were ahead in North Carolina and in Maine, although, pending these developments around Plattner, we'll see what happens there. There was a tie between Democrat James Tallarico and Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton in Texas. So that's a surprisingly competitive race, that Democrats have been trying for decades to have a statewide win in red Texas. And then Republicans were leading in Alaska, Ohio, and Iowa's Senate races. And so at the same time, what the polling shows there is Republicans if the election were held today based off those polls, Republicans are still favored to win. But at the same time, the closeness of the races, including in those 3 states, Alaska, Iowa, Ohio, just a couple points separating the candidates, the closeness of those races shows that Democrats do have a path. So I think those are the ones to watch, as we, particularly, like I said, in Maine, we'll see what happens there. Texas continues to be a very interesting race now that the incumbent is out and it's Paxton versus Tallarico. So, some races where Democrats are feeling more optimistic. In North Carolina, Roy Cooper is ahead by 7 points in this polling. Other races more tighter margins.
So it looks like the Democrats may have a spending issue on their hand in terms of where to send the money to get the most bang for their buck.
I think so. And, that was always a part of the conversation, particularly as, Democrats were seeing really early in this cycle whether or not they would be competitive or could be competitive in Texas. That's a state where Democrats maybe haven't spent as much because they haven't had stronger candidates for particular races. And same on the Republican side at the same time, though, because Republicans may find themselves on the back foot in states that they thought would be a little bit more comfortable this cycle. So there's that element as well.
Jerome, do we have a market for just sort of a head-to-head Democrat versus Republican there in Michigan that you can pull up?
Yep.
Oh wow. So let us know. Okay, that's interesting. That it much hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't changed that much. Although I think the chart is a little bit deceptive in how it displays the numbers, because if you look back in February, right, Democrats are actually closer to 80% chance to win the Michigan Senate race. Now they're at like 71%, which is, a pretty big numerical shift in terms of, going from 80-20 to 70-30. They're still favored because I think the general environment in Michigan and nationally favors Democrats. I think, there's no scandal, right, that like clouding El-Sayed's candidacy. It's more, is he maybe too progressive for the state? That's probably explains some of why the margins in the market narrowed a little bit. But overall, this is a very, very close state. If you look at past midterms, Democrats have actually done well in Michigan, even in 2022 and 2018. Obviously, there is likely going to be a very strong Democratic ticket with Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State, leading most likely on the governor's side. With the one-on-one against John James, most likely. There used to be a third-party candidate, Mike Dugan, the mayor of Detroit, who ended his candidacy, so that's a much more straightforward election for Democrats there. So there's a lot of tailwinds for Democrats in the state, although I will note this is, much closer than North Carolina, much closer than Georgia in the markets. So there is some additional uncertainty owing to, I guess, Democrats haven't really nominated a progressive Bernie Sanders-esque candidate in a swing state, a Trump-won state that is close in Senate races in the past. And this might be one of the first times that they actually do it and see how the electorate reacts.
Julia, another interesting moment during that debate was when Rick Albin, the moderator, asked, is this race about more than just a Michigan Senate seat? Is it about the future of the party? From a campaign standpoint, the folks that you talk to, do they see it as that, or do they just simply see this as we need to win a race in this specific state? Let's try and nominate the person who can best do that and then figure out what the future of the party is a little bit later on.
I think it's a little bit of both. Of course, this is a specific race, and like we've said before, all of these states have their own contours that make the race, particular, and some things you can't apply nationally. But at the same time, I think that it has been maybe increasingly seen as part of something bigger, which would, maybe why the moderator asked that question too. As we get, the string of recent progressive anti-establishment candidate wins, I think all of these races are putting increased spotlight on this broader question for the party of what's the best path forward. I think it'll be interesting to watch in the next couple of weeks. Also in Michigan, as well as in some other states, there will be additional tests for DSA candidates. Of course, El-Sayed is not formally a DSA candidate, but sort of representative of that progressive and anti-establishment push. And there are a couple races in Michigan. Representative Tlaib is running for re-election and in the 12th district. And then there's also the Detroit DSA branch is supporting a candidate and a challenge against Representative Thanadar. So we'll see some races there that I think will be continued tests of appetite for this kind of candidate in Michigan, and then, coupled with these national wins could speak to, this broader conversation. I think it was the DSA said something akin to, we're moving out of, the Big Apple. We're seeing some of these wins on the West Coast and looking past the New York primaries that really started this so-called Mamdani effect.
Jerome, we got a little bit of time left. Just one last question for you. Any markets standing out to you as we get closer to the midterms? Any movement you're seeing out there that really sort of piqued your interest?
Yeah, I think one race that's, I think, on the same night as Michigan is the Wisconsin governor primary. That is one where there actually is a DSA candidate, Francesca Hong, who, has now taken the lead in the markets to be the next Democratic nominee. Wisconsin is a absolutely razor-thin state. All three times that Trump ran, it was within 1%. And Democrats currently hold the governorship, but, I think it's fascinating to kind of test, can this kind of message that is more progressive, more populist, resonate in these sort of Rust Belt states?
Yeah, it's certainly going to be something that we're going to be watching play out as we continue to click through the primary calendar and get to November. It'll be here before we know it, but still a lot of races to be run, a lot of debates to be had. We certainly do appreciate you being here with us on the Hill Decision Desk 26. For Jerome Zhao, Julia Mueller, Caroline Vakil, and Robbie Suave, and of course, Chris Stirewalt, I'm Cory Smith. We'll see you next Tuesday, everybody. Have a great night.